Welcome. Thank you so much for joining our broadband discussion here today. We will spend the next hour talking about the importance of broadband, and I'm going to turn it over to today's moderator, Charlie Dennie, who is with the State Broadband Office. He is the director, and welcome, Charlie. Thanks so much for helping with this panel.
Well, thank you, Sarah. We've got to turn the volume down here. Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Excited to be here. You really can't have a conference these days without talking about broadband. I don't think it's even legal. We have some great folks on the panel here today. We have Brad Hall, who's the Vice President for External Affairs at Appalachian Power Company, and he's going to be talking to us about middle mile and what that means to communities. We have my friend Rob Hinton, who is the former executive director of the Broadband Council. And we have the lovely and talented Natalie Roper, who is always a fun person to have a conversation with. She's the executive director of Generation West Virginia. And my longtime friend, Kris Warner, who is the state director of the USDA Rural Development here in West Virginia. So we're going to lead off this morning with Brad, who has some exciting things to say about middle mile and what that means to our communities. So Brad, it's all yours.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks for having me today. Great to be on the panel and great to continue conversations about broadband. It seems that everybody's talking about this these days, and I think there's a lot of good reasons for it. I think the pandemic has certainly shown exactly how badly we do have a digital divide in rural America, and we want to talk about that today. Charlie, I don't, whoever's hosting, can you give me the ability to share my screen? I don't know if you can do that.
Sarah, I believe that's controlled by you folks, isn't
it? You have it now.
Thank you very much. Let me just pull up some slides here. So if everyone can see the screen, I'll just go over a couple of slides today, and of course we want to get to Q&A and get to the other panelists, but we've been at Appalachian Power, we've been involved now in assisting the state with a potential middle mile broadband project for a couple of years. Been working very closely with Rob and the Broadband Enhancement Council on getting to where we are today, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. So I'll tell you about our involvement and how we're trying to help. I'll tell you about some hurdles to success, and then also I want to really give you kind of an idea of what you and your communities can do to be ready for broadband opportunities. So this picture that you see here, it's a beautiful picture of the Appalachian Mountains. As beautiful as it is, it also illustrates the challenges that are out there to getting broadband to every person in rural America, especially in Appalachia. These mountains and the trees make things quite difficult, and the sparse population, where population is really only in the valleys in most cases, can make it really difficult to get broadband out to every person. This is just a little bit of my background, but I'm responsible for community affairs, external affairs, corporate communications, customer business development, and economic development in 3 states, for Virginia, West Virginia, and Tennessee. Been involved in every utility out there except for natural gas. Maybe I'll have to check that box one of these days. And also have a strong background in economic development. And really didn't know I was going to be using my telecom, but it certainly come into play once we got involved in this discussion. So in our involvement, what we've been doing is, the first thing I say is, why is the electric utility talking about this conversation? Well, if you look at electric utilities, we're very uniquely positioned for a middle mile build out. And why is that? We have electric infrastructure nearly to every person in the area. So if you just look at our territory, we're going to have infrastructure that goes out and touches almost every single customer. So we can leverage that infrastructure that's out there in the rural areas to deliver broadband to our customers. Secondly, Doing infrastructure is a core competency of the power company. It's what we do. We build transmission lines and distribution lines, and we even build fiber. What's interesting is that we own, as AEP, the company, in the 11 states that we do have service territories, we have 21,000 miles of fiber. 2,200 miles of those are in Appalachian Power, and that's growing by a pretty good snip every year. We are looking at deploying fiber in the supply space. Now, what does that mean? That means we're putting this fiber up in the power space. Other folks can't do that in the telecom industry because of the dangers of working in and around power. So we need to have folks that are trained to work in that space. And that allows us to have a bit of an advantage that I'll talk about as well. We got involved early on with the legislature and how we could help with this. Senate Bill 3 came out in 2019, and it allowed us, us being the investor-owned utilities, First Energy and Appalachian Power Company, to do a feasibility study to determine, can we participate in helping build out digital, helping solve the digital divide, if you will, in rural America. So we set off to do that feasibility study, and we delivered that to the Broadband Enhancement Council in December of 2019. That study found that we could participate by building middle mile fiber out to our customers and then partnering with an internet service provider to do that last mile to get service to the customers. Then we had a follow-up bill in 2020, House Bill 4619, that actually defined how we could do this. It defined what a project could look like, and that we would be able to go to the Public Service Commission to get these projects approved and able to recover so we could make the investments. This is a project that we're working on. As I said, we worked very closely with the Broadband Enhancement Council, and this is a pretty big project. This is a 2-county project in Logan and Mingo counties in West Virginia. That we have approximately 34,000 meters in these 2 counties, and we believe that there's about 15,000 unserved customers from a broadband perspective in these 2 counties, and that would be customers that have less than a 25 megabit per second download speed and a 3 megabit per second upload speed. We're going to build 400 miles of fiber. That's about a $50 million investment, and it's also going to use 200 miles of existing fiber. So if you can see that map I have on the screen, the blue is the fiber that we would build in this project. The green is the existing fiber that will be utilized from this project. And then we've also gone through an RFP process to select the last mile provider, who is Gigabeam Networks, that's going to provide the service. And then because of the need, we also recently announced a foundation grant, and we've put 26 hotspot locations throughout West Virginia to provide students that don't have access with a way to go somewhere and get access to high-speed internet as the state works to build out their fiber infrastructure. A couple of things here, and Charlie, if you want to do some of this in Q&A, we certainly can, but just a couple of things on hurdles to success. It's taken us 2 years to get to this point to be able to build this project. We still have another step to go, and that is to make our submission to the Public Service Commission, and we hope to start construction on this project in 2021. It'll take about 12 months to build, but there's a lot of hurdles to success. I'm going to share that with the folks watching today because I want your communities to be ready for success. The first challenge that we've got to deal with is the inaccuracy in the FCC maps. Folks wonder why not as much funding has been available. Even though there's funding out there, the FCC maps are pretty inaccurate. And those FCC maps determine who may be unserved or served. And then based on that map, determines how much federal funding you could qualify for in some of the different funds out there. So in this Logan and Mingo County project, if you just look at the RDOF fund, which is $16 billion that's been appropriated by the federal government, Logan and Mingo counties only qualifies for $1.2 million through that program. We're building $50 million just in middle mile, and that doesn't count the investment required for the last mile. So there's a significant gap there, which creates some challenges in funding and identifying where the customers are. We need more internet service provider engagement. We actually had to have 2 RFP processes to find a partner for this project. Some of that's education, letting them know how this works, because this is a new program, and making sure we're communicating with them, but we've got to get more folks involved. I already talked about the insufficient grant funding based on those maps. And then broadband affordability will be a challenge in some of the rural areas where we don't have high incomes to be able to pay some of the prices that are hit with us by these ISPs, just because the cost to serve is great. I'll just quickly go over this, and then we'll go through, I'll get to the other panelists. I want to skip down to this last page, because I want you as a community to know, what can you do? We've put together a checklist for our communities to help them understand what they can do to be ready for a broadband project. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I mentioned the fact that the maps are inaccurate. So we are actually having to work with our communities and with consultants to come in and help us identify where the real unserved portion of these communities are. And that helps us know where we can build, how big our project may be, and who we can serve. And so if communities are working ahead to get this work done, that goes a long way. So when an opportunity comes from us or from somewhere else in the state, and all the efforts that's going on for broadband, you will be poised and ready for a project. Identifying, team members in your community that needs to serve on a panel or a committee to do this work, to put a plan in place so that you know what you can do, to identify grant funding. So these are just some of the things that's in this checklist, and we can certainly make this checklist available to our watchers today. But I just wanted you to know we've done this to help you understand, and I'm sure we'll get some more of that into Q&A, Charlie. I don't want to take all the time. So I'll stop there, see if there's any questions, or if you want to just go on to the next panelist.
I'll tell you what, Brad, thank you very much for that. That's terrific information. And I think what you've just said dovetails very nicely into what Natalie is working on. So I think at this point, I want to have Natalie talk about what she's doing, and then Kris will talk about the money, and then we can take some Q&A. Natalie?
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. I was just thinking that. I was about to chat you, Brad. I might even have you bring back up the sort of like hurdles slide, if you don't mind, Brad, and I might refer to that as a way of talking through how we can help support communities in overcoming those hurdles. So thanks, Charlie, for seeing that. Hey, everyone, I'm Natalie Roper. I'm the Executive Director at Generation West Virginia. Our mission is to attract and retain young people in the state. And we are in a 3-year initiative in partnership with the Benedum Foundation. Starting in March, we joined forces, Generation and Benedum, through their 75th anniversary project to work on identifying locally driven broadband solutions. And what are really all of the things that Brad said laid the foundation for this perfectly, so thank you. And he's right, there are a lot of real hurdles. And like AEP is showing, there's also a lot of really great momentum. And so at Generation West Virginia, we're working with Benedum to really help fill some of the community capacity gaps, to help support communities in going through whatever that process might look like for you to be ready for a broadband project, including help overcome whatever barriers you might come up with along the way. At Generation West Virginia, we talk about our work as sort of having a whatever it takes kind of approach. We think of that in terms of attracting and retaining young people. We try to do whatever it takes, making it easier for more young people to be able to stay here and choose here. And that approach is consistent with our work in broadband as well. How do we help communities do whatever it takes to be able to build out a project locally? So what this might look like, we're really thinking of ourselves as kind of community support, the local version of the conversation we're having today, sort of community support and like community navigators to help guide anyone interested throughout the process. And really what Brad said is really the process we're thinking of too. And how can we work alongside you in working from identifying a project to being able to secure that grant funding. So yeah, Brad, do you mind just pulling up that slide, and I can kind of walk through what that might look like as an example. Thanks. So we, having seen these same hurdles, we're really working with communities in targeting a 9-county region, which is the Hatfield-McCoy region and the Monforest Towns region. That being said, if you're working in a community outside of that, please still reach out. We are targeting those areas, but want to make sure that we're supporting community broadband projects across the state as well. But the inaccuracies in mapping are really challenging. And like Brad said, it takes time to really invest in the customer surveys that are needed to really show a different picture than those FCC maps are showing. So Generation West Virginia, through the broadband project with Benedum, but also using our existing organizational infrastructure, has capacity across the state to be able to help support communities in this process. So if you are somewhere that is in need of doing customer demand analysis, market analysis first, we can help be a part of that process. The importance of having more ISPs be involved is huge. And for us, that's one reason we get really excited about the role that grant funding can play in this solution. It is expensive, incredibly expensive for providers to build out infrastructure. And when our population and customer density is low, it's challenging for providers to determine if that's worth their investment. So this is where we get really excited about the availability of federal grant funding to help fill that gap for providers. We're seeing a lot of potential in public-private partnerships. And through this project, we're working to be able to work with communities and help build those provider partnerships, build a public-private partnership, identify grant funding that would make it easier for more providers to be able to say yes to building in lower density areas. And then again, do whatever it takes to support you in getting an application ready that would be competitive, and as well an application that would be setting it up for more providers to be able to respond to RFPs, et cetera. I also think that part of our goals through this initiative, there is existing federal funding. The eligibility is a challenge, but we also see that while there is existing funding, often West Virginia isn't taking full advantage of the existing federal funding that's out there. So how can we really build up the demand for the existing federal funding and make a case for for receiving more funding, maxing out the the federal grant opportunities that are available. I also think that being able to build out these public-private partnerships to build competitive grant applications that Kris will talk more about from a funder perspective really can work to address some of the affordability concerns too. Often without grant funding, providers are having to put forward the infrastructure costs and having to make that back, of course, in higher user fees when the infrastructure costs are so high. If we can work with public entities to build out public-private partnerships where there's publicly owned broadband, that you're able to set up service agreements with providers, where providers are able to take advantage of grant funding to build out infrastructure, they have less costs to be able to make up in user fees when grants are providing the infrastructure costs, hopefully being able to really start to address some of the affordability concerns as well. So really high level, thanks again, Brad, for setting this up. Appreciate you sharing your slides. But we really, I hope, can just be someone that's on your team. I think the main call to action for us is if you're a community that is interested in talking about how to bring broadband where you live, whether you're a local government entity or a public entity, we are working to build out public-private partnership projects connected with grant funding needed. Again, this is a 3-year initiative. We're in the beginning phases of it, but hitting the ground running already. We're also really committed. This is, as I hope clear to all of you, a complex problem that requires partnerships. And Generation West Virginia is really working within a system that is already at play, thanks to all the other panelists that have been working so hard on this issue for a long time. We're seeking to really fill the gaps and do whatever it takes and bring partners together like those on this call. So reach out to us. We're excited to be alongside you in this work.
Thank you, Natalie. That's exciting information, dovetailed nicely into what Brad's talking about. I think we probably need to get Kris in here right now and tell us how he's going to pay for all of this.
Charlie, thank you very much. I've learned a lot already just hearing Brad and Natalie. Brad, I'm on Steal Your Checklist. That's something that is much needed in our work, so we're going to put that to use. And Natalie, if I heard you correctly, there is a need for someone to review applications, quite frankly. With us being the funding agency, the federal funding agency, there's only so much we can do, and at some point, you know, we have to step back with our amount of help. So there is a real need. We've had some applications that have been very close to being funded, and just a very minor, mistake or leaving something out of an application that a third set of eyes might catch would be very important. So we hope we're able to work together in the future. Again, I'm Kris Warner. I'm the State Director for USDA Rural Development. There are 3 agencies that make up the Rural Development Mission Area. We cover not only housing, but rural business services, and then mainly community programs that we're going to focus on today. So we're the federal financing and provide funding options in the forms of loans, grants, and loan grant combinations to facilitate broadband deployment in areas that don't have sufficient access to broadband. So our broadband programs generate private sector investment to deploy broadband infrastructure to provide high-speed internet connectivity to as many rural premises as possible. So I want to focus on 3 of those grant and grant loan program areas. And then I want to use a very recent example that an announcement that was just made in the last 3 weeks here in North Central West Virginia. But so number 1, we have our distance learning and telemedicine grants. And as I mention these, I want to let you know we administer 49 grants across all 3 agencies. If you go to our USDA website, you can see the programs that I'm mentioning this morning and get more information and details. But distance learning and telemedicine grants are in the neighborhood of $50,000 up to $500,000. And this is simply to improve education and healthcare in communities with less population than 20,000 people. Next are Community Connect grants. The Community Connect grants range anywhere from $50,000 up to $1 million. And this is to provide broadband to unserved communities, again, less than 20,000 people in population. Applications, by the way, right now are being accepted through midnight on December 23rd for the Community Connect grants. And then we have our Reconnect grant and loan program, again, to expand broadband, but we can work in areas, rural areas, up to 20,000 in population. And then if you're in an urbanized area, we can go up to 50,000. So the only area that we really can't focus on in the entire state of West Virginia is the city of Charleston. I promised I would mention very briefly a project that was recently announced. It was covering mostly Doddridge County, but it reaches into Barber County and Randolph County as well. And this $7.6 million grant was to CityNet to assist in constructing 205 miles of fiber to the premises of broadband infrastructure. This investment will connect 6,054 people, 58 farms, 41 businesses, 3 fire stations, 2 public schools, and 2 post offices to high-speed broadband. Now, the way this came about and what made a successful application was CityNet worked with the Doddridge County Board of Education. I think their investment was $150,000. The Doddridge County Commission contributed $600,000, and they knocked down a $7.6 million grant. The neatest thing out of this whole project is that every school child in the entire county of Doddridge will have internet service to the home. They'll have a computer provided by the school system, and there will never again be a snow day or a COVID-19 day in Doddridge County. That's small communities coming together, working together, taking advantage of the federal financing that Natalie mentioned earlier that is available, and is the type of funding that we provide through USDA Rural Development. I'm going to brag a little bit on the agency here in West Virginia and tell you just in the last year alone, from November to November, we've attracted $46 million, mainly in grants. There is, I think, one low interest rate loan in there to expand broadband. And we look forward to doing more of that. And with that, Charlie, I'll wrap up and look for questions when we're done here.
Well, on behalf of the students in Doddridge County, I think you owe them something of an apology, Kris. I used to pray for a snow day every great once in a while. But
Charlie, you had to walk uphill both ways though during snowstorms.
Yeah, that was always the problem. Thanks for that great information, Kris. I think I'd like to give Rob Hinton an opportunity to kind of tie all of this together for us. As I mentioned earlier, Rob is the immediate past chairman of the West Virginia Broadband Council and has worked on a whole lot of these projects. I know he helped guide the legislation through for Appalachian Power for the things that they were doing. So, Rob, would you care to make a few comments for us here?
Yeah, sure. Happy to be on this panel and share the stage with all of you folks as a retired public official, right? So so I had the privilege to spend the last 4 years chairing the West Virginia Broadband Council, basically taking it from its first ever meeting into what it is today. And we've got a great group of council members that are still serving alongside of the new chairman, Robbie Morse. But a couple of things to highlight. One, we've always talked about broadband being an all hands on deck. There's not one agency, one entity, one company that's going to come in and solve the problem. It's going to be a dynamic, full press Virginia type atmosphere that we're going to have in order to solve the broadband problem that we have in West Virginia and the connectivity problem in West Virginia. It's exciting to see that Benedum and Generation West Virginia have teamed up in filling a definite need and gap in community outreach. And, we do need more resources, not only for ISPs, but also for communities. One of the things that we did when we started this council was we tried to find funding anywhere we possibly could at the state level and federal level. And one of those opportunities was in the HUD money, CDBG, that we could actually single out and put a little bit towards broadband planning, and that's been effective. But we still need more. It's never going to be enough. I don't think we'll ever have this problem solved 100%. I think we're going to be working on it for a long period of time, but having all of these resources in place is certainly going to accelerate the process. Some of the items that State Director Kris Warner's talked about, the model of getting into the communities and working with the ISPs, working with those individuals to help them understand the grant process and the resources that are available from a financial standpoint and how to navigate that field. There's proof in that concept, and that proof in that concept was the $47 million figure that Director Warner mentioned today. I think we're almost nearing 100 million in total federal funds, just over the past 4 or 5 years that we've started pushing that type of an effort. So having more folks involved at the community level, I think is going to even accelerate that even more. And we're going to see more of a federal share and financial share come into West Virginia. With regard to the power utilities, That's something that as we move forward, that's going to accelerate both in the northern half of the state as well as in the southern part of the state. Both Appalachian Power as well as First Energy, both are participating in those projects. First Energy is moving along on theirs, and quite frankly, APCO is moving at an extremely rapid pace with their Logan and Mingo project, and hopefully they'll start hanging fiber pretty soon, and look to do another couple of counties in the southern part of the state, and just keep the snowball effect that we have moving. We had some big wins. Facebook fiber coming through the state. So Facebook, it's, if we got big tech companies, Amazon, Google, Facebook, we want some of those footprints in West Virginia. So we were very excited to have Facebook in West Virginia, and we needed long haul fiber. We needed more dark fiber in the state of West Virginia. We lacked that, and that was playing into our limitations in connectivity. We also landed Zayo in the northern part of the state with long haul fiber, so that'll help in bringing down connectivity access or backhaul or data connectivity costs. But again, it's been a pleasure and a privilege for me to serve on the council. It was like having a second job. And the other thing that I'm very, very excited about is that Kelly Workman has definitely, gotten some help in the Office of Broadband. It looks like we were successful in actually standing up the West Virginia Office of Broadband inside the Development Office and Department of Commerce. And Charlie Dennie is quite frankly an ideal pick to be the state director for broadband, and we're excited to see him in that role, and I think he's going to be able to accelerate what we have started even at a faster pace, right? So that's kind of just a recap of the last 4 years. I'm excited to be joined by more individuals and more folks and more agencies. It's exciting to see where we have gone, and it'll be exciting to see where we go from here.
Thank you, Rob, for those comments, and thank you for your leadership and your vision with this. You did a great job of getting us all started down the right path here. Sarah, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. They're starting to come in, Charlie. One is, what can higher education leaders do, institutions, to help build broadband? Do you need to collect data? Do you need surveys? Any ideas there?
Well, I had a very interesting conversation just very recently with Dr. Powell, who is the head of the WBNet, and Matt Turner, who I believe his position is the Vice Chancellor for Technology. And we're trying to put together some ideas, Sarah, on what we might be able to do there. Dr. Powell has a lot on his plate. They're the provider for K through 12, and we're looking at some ideas on how they can bring that along too. But I think they're going to be a key partner in this solution moving forward.
From my perspective, when the small, the block grants, the community block grants were able to go to broadband, I think it was like a year and a half ago now, or maybe 2 years ago, the Alliance, we were very interested in working with communities and trying to build. And so I would call out, and I called a few small towns or counties, just inquiring, is there something that, for higher ed, could we do? And they were like, well, we're putting our RFP together. We have to hire a consultant. We're just not there yet. And so we maybe were a little early at that point coming in from the Alliance perspective, but I would love to explore that with you, Charlie, and all the panelists on how we maybe could explore that again, if there was something in particular that we could help with.
Well, I'm sure we'd be anxious to do that. Natalie, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think something that we feel really excited about right now too is just the role that any public entity can play in this solution. And I think what has been one of the primary barriers that we've seen to people accessing federal funding is sort of, well, an assumption that it's like really complicated and how in the world would we get involved, right? Which is fair. I think broadband can feel really overwhelming. Like this is not my expertise either. And I think that's really what we're trying to do, is sort of help show that some of these kinds of structures that would make it possible for public entities to apply for grants are not that overwhelming. So a lot of the federal funds require it to be publicly owned broadband. So to access those federal infrastructure grants, it has to be publicly owned. And that can sound nerve-wracking, but really it's very similar to how entities own any other property and could contract out with a provider to operate and maintain that infrastructure. And to me, I think higher education, as well as I saw a question in the chat about local government, higher education, local governments, EDAs, all can be those public entities that can really take the lead on this issue if there's interest and capacity. And we are happy to start those conversations and try to think about what kinds of partnerships might be available and sort of connect you with other folks that have done that work in the state. So I think higher education can also be really involved on that demand side, like what Brad talked about. How do we really take advantage of the data that y'all have that show the real needs, even if that looks different than those FCC maps? Being able to show that people lack access in real time through your students, I think can be important for identifying where there's real need. And then not overlooking the fact that I think higher education institutions and truly any public entity can be an actual partner in applying for federal funding and building public-private partnerships with providers and truly like owning the infrastructure, which is something that I think is not something we were really thinking about before diving into this project. So I just wanted to mention that.
Kris,
Charlie, Sarah, I've got a couple things I can add there, if you would. So one thought, Sarah, to your question is probably the resources that the university can bring to the region from a surveying perspective. So what I mean is, you know, we now are, the project in West Virginia is our second project. Our first project is in Virginia, in a rural area there in Grayson County, Virginia, and we learned a lot in that process, and we brought that education to our process in West Virginia. And that goes back to the checklist I mentioned, of that we need to really be able to identify not only unserved customers, but to asset map in a region, in a community. So, you know, if the university has assets or research students or, you know, master's students that could help be a consultant for the region to do asset mapping, you know, where is the assets for fiber in the region, who is served, who is unserved, that data of your students that maybe don't live on campus, and you could survey and know where they live and if they have service, if they don't have service. All of that data could be mapped and help the community be prepared for what's needed to be done in their community.
Thanks, Brad. Kris, are there funding opportunities there? I noticed, or I know it's not higher ed, but there was a significant amount of participation in Doddridge County, as I recall.
You know, I don't know if I understood the question correctly, but I do want to mention something. If the question is, you know, what could higher education do? And I was excited when I heard Natalie talk about being able to, you know, help and assist communities and getting applications. And one thing that is pretty painful to us is when we see these applications that are going to be scored at the national level and are nationally competitive, to see something left out of an application, somebody that, you know, a group that's been working so long and hard, they just happen to miss something. You know, I think, you know, higher education could be involved in that. You know, many of these communities just don't have grant writers and people to put applications together, and their nuances. Yesterday we were in a Community Connect virtual workshop, and one of the gentlemen scoring the applications at the national level said, if our checklist goes 1 through 10, respond 1 through 10, and don't mix those portions of the application up. It's still eligible, but it puts the person scoring the application in a much better mood to provide a better score, quite frankly. And sometimes there's simple things like that. And some of our smaller communities could benefit by working with higher education just to make sure that those applications are in order, and that if the application is asking for something, that small community does not misinterpret what the question is on that application. Charlie, also, before I lose the floor here, I want to commend Rob Hinton and Kelly Workman. We couldn't have done what we've done in the last year without the West Virginia Broadband Enhancement Council. They have been tremendous partners, and you're fortunate to be working with that crew, Charlie, and we're glad you're in the position you're in now for the entire state of West Virginia.
Well, thanks, Kris. I appreciate that, and I'll tell you, when the Secretary of Commerce told me that Kelly was going to be part of this whole deal, it gave me a great deal of comfort. She knows her way around. I'd like to move on. Sarah, do we have another question?
Well, it's more directed to Kris. In regards to your grant process and the funds available, how long are those grants? I mean, are they like a 12-month grant? Are they 2 years? I mean, is it just project-based? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'll answer in short. Normally, there is up to a 2-year period of time. Again, each one of those programs is a little bit different. I just heard Richard Jenkins, our general field representative, who's really the expert in-house for rural development, and originally from West Virginia, and will bend over backwards to help. That they like to see most of that funding used in the first year, but there are things, for example, in one of the programs where there has to be at least 2 computer stations set up, for example, in a public library as a part of the grant program, that they have another year to either build out that facility or install that equipment. So typically you see our grants used over a 2-year period of time.
Okay. And looking at the importance of broadband, we all understand that education, and because of COVID, we need broadband. But are we forgetting maybe some sectors in industry sectors that could really grow? And can we talk a little bit about economic development and the use of broadband and some like how we can target certain sectors if we can increase our capacity? Brad, do you want to start on that one?
Sarah, I'd like to make a comment about that. Just recently, we had a conversation with some folks from the community and technical colleges about starting some programs, and they've done some terrific work already. The Bridge Valley Community and Technical College has a program where they're training people to do directional boring. And that's the machine that does the primary work for putting fiber underground. And they have a lineman program that has been incredibly successful. And that trains people to do the pole work, both low voltage and high voltage. And the Community and Technical College program, again, was in here talking about what we need in order to grow this work. And we're talking about people who can splice fiber and do the other technical things that need to be happened. And I think one of the things that we kind of overlook sometimes, and someone pointed this out to me the other day, that building out these networks in West Virginia is in fact really a jobs program, that we will expand employment by hundreds of people that are going to be located around the state doing the service and repair work and the installation and the construction. And if we train these people here in West Virginia to do this work, I think we're going to be very successful with it. You know, if you need a repair guy in Clay County, going to find someone who you recruit from Columbus, Ohio to come and be in Clay County is probably not going to be a good long-term fix. But if you've got a guy in Clay County who wants to be in Clay County and his family's in Clay County and that's his culture, and he can go to a local trade school or community college and learn how to do that work, it's probably going to be a pretty happy guy.
Sarah, I can jump in, Sarah, if you want. From an economic development standpoint, you know, 15 years ago, broadband was nice to have by for some industries, required by other industries. But now when you look from a site consultant standpoint, which is these are folks that locate industry to a community, to a site, if broadband is not at that site, you will not compete for that project. It's just the bottom line. And we have a number of sites in West Virginia that don't have it to the site. It's nearby, and the company says we can get it there, and I'm sure they can. But when you are in a national or international competitive process to win an industry, you have to have it on site or you will be eliminated from the search process. So it's very important that we think about our industrial sites and make sure these assets are at the industrial site. Our project in Mingo and Logan County will actually take fiber to the Mingo wood product site, which is now the Harless industrial site. It doesn't have fiber on site now. And so this will resolve that. And we've got other sites. Apple Grove is a huge site on the Ohio River. We're putting some work there now, and it doesn't have fiber to the site. It's got to be addressed. So it's very important that we think about our industrial sites as we get broadband out, and we may have to get it there before a customer is there to win a customer. And that's really an important fact for us to consider.
Sarah, I can add a little bit to that from an economic development standpoint. At my full-time job is development. When we look at West Virginia, we look at the brain drain. So that's something Natalie is obviously passionate about, is keeping young people here, keeping young professionals in West Virginia. But over the past couple decades, we've lost people because of the lack of opportunities, because of jobs being place-based. Right now, it's been a trend over the years, 10 to 20% increased every year of remote work availability. So people that were able to work remote, and it's grown about 10 to 20% year after year across all industry sectors. Right now, the pandemic has kind of catapulted us into this remote atmosphere where companies are forced to pivot, maneuver, and figure out a way to have an operation where it's successful, where people are working remotely. I mean, looking at this, you've got Director Warner, who looks like he might be at a home. You've got Brad Hall and Natalie, who looks like they may be able to at a home too. I'm in a phone booth. But, you know, this is something that, you know, we can really shine as a state because we don't have to worry about place-based work anymore. We have to worry about lifestyle-based work, where now people can live wherever they want to. We have communities that are attractive in West Virginia. They're attractive because of their ruralness, their attractiveness because of their just the uniqueness. And the one thing that they're not attractive on is connectivity. Some communities are better connected than others, but we've got to improve our connectivity in all of our communities so we can attract people that want to work remotely, that want to come back to West Virginia, that want to stay in West Virginia, that actually, you know, maybe they're not from West Virginia. Natalie and myself are not from West Virginia, but we choose to live in West Virginia. We came here, you know, once, and that was all we needed to stay. So I think from an economic development standpoint, we now, instead of recruiting you know, in recruiting office footprints, which I still think we need to do, recruiting manufacturers, which I still think we need to do. Now we can just recruit the people, recruit the jobs, and they can come with the people that can fill our communities. In regard to one of the questions about representing local government, how do we should be doing to help? I would say that any conversation that anybody is having, whether it's from a community standpoint or a higher ed or scholastic K through 12 standpoint, there's a handful, and I'm sure Charlie has this list that can, or Kelly can get it to anybody. There's a handful of providers in the state that are providing service. One obviously is a national one. The others are state, West Virginia owned companies. They're regionally, you know, serving their communities, and those folks should be, you should reach out to representatives from those companies. Those companies should, representatives should be part of conversations that you're having about bringing connectivity to your community. With the 2 long haul projects and the middle mile projects that the power companies are doing, getting in and out of communities is going to be a little bit more feasible than it has been in the past. And a provider that doesn't have service, a network in an area that you're speaking of, may be able to data transport and be able to provide service in that area. The other opportunity is that this is an unregulated market. Hopefully it stays that way. There's an entrepreneurial approach to this as well. You know, somebody with a little bit of tech savviness, maybe from what Charlie was talking about with the community and technical colleges, you have a little understanding of fiber networks, you have a little understanding of networking and IT, and you've got a small community of 100, 200 homes. You could create a small ISP and provide service, and you can apply for some of the funds that are available to do that small build out. So the opportunities are endless. It's just a matter of making sure that all the parties that you have at the table, one of those parties are an ISP or somebody representing a provider. They can help the conversation develop and build from there.
That's a really great point, Rob. That is, I expect to see with these middle mile projects, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see another 2 or 3 of these guys pop up within a couple of years.
I thought I second all of what you just said, Rob. I think we are really excited by the potential of remote work right now. Also, not to sound like a broken record, but if we can help be a partner in convening in your community around different partnerships, including ISPs, like please reach out. That's what we're here for. Happy to start a conversation and just see how we can help. But on the remote work side, some of the other projects that Generation West Virginia is involved in are focused, of course, on workforce development and placing people into jobs and training they need to access jobs here. One of those is a software development training program, and we were able to maintain our same 86% job placement rate within 6 months, even during the pandemic, which I think is just really telling that the technology industry was still hiring in the pandemic. People were able to continue working in the pandemic, and graduates that had used this program to transition from the retail and service industries that were so hard hit by the pandemic were able to maintain employment after having been in tech jobs. So I think there's huge opportunity in remote for folks that are already here. And I think what we have really seen in the past few months is we've heard from more employers than ever before about wanting to hire folks remotely in tech. And I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I'm excited about how do we really recruit even out of state employers who are now more open than ever to hiring remotely, to open satellite offices, satellite remote offices in West Virginia. When I think about remote work, I think there's 2 economic development sides. There's recruiting the people that already have the jobs that can live and move anywhere. And then I think there's really how do we recruit companies? Of course, broadband infrastructure being foundational to that, saying, could you commit to hiring, X number of remote workers in West Virginia, even if you're based out of state? I think we have a real opportunity to leverage some larger urban markets to create remote work for West Virginians here. So we're really excited about that and have seen already the potential of that just in the past few months. So I wanted to share that as a small case study to what we're talking about.
Thank you, Natalie. Sarah, do we have time for another question? You're muted, Sarah.
Yes, I always forget that. One just came through. I'm a community leader, and I'm interested in helping to bring broadband to my community to spur economic growth. Where do I start?
Ask her where that what part of the state is that community in?
Hey, Charlie, while she's doing that, can I jump in for a second?
You bet.
Yeah, you were thinking about other funding opportunities. You know, just yesterday, in the last 24 hours, WVU has announced that they're going to go to all remote classes through the end of the year, the calendar year at least. And just like the Board of Education in Doddridge County provided funding to help provide access to every one of the students in their county, there's no reason why our land grant institution couldn't be involved on any of these applications. USDA loves to see other dollars being contributed, and we're one of the few federal agencies that does not have a block on where those dollars can come from. You know, it can be private enterprise, it could be higher education if they found value in helping the students in the state of West Virginia, their professors in the state of West Virginia, by being a part of one of these applications. The public-private aspect of this, I think, helps the scoring when it comes to federal grant dollars through rural development. We consistently see that. I mentioned the one example, but there are other examples of a local economic development authority along with the ISP to be able to attract the federal grant, but there's no reason higher education couldn't be involved in that process.
Thanks, Kris. Sarah, did you find out where that person's from?
This Southern West Virginia.
Southern West Virginia. Brad, sounds like you're up.
Boy, have I got a thing for you. In all seriousness, we've learned a lot through the 2 years that we've been working through this process. And, we've had some great partners, including the state of West Virginia and the Broadband Enhancement Council. And I think of ROC, one of the regional groups that's working on broadband connectivity throughout the state. We've learned a lot of things about what data do we need to have in order to be able to move more efficiently and effectively on a project. And so, for instance, in the Logan Domingo project, we didn't have enough data. So we've hired a consultant to help us pull that data together. There's a lot of grant dollars you can get to do studies, which is good. But so what I would recommend is to take a look at the checklist that we put together, and I'll be happy to share that. Sarah, I can get that to you or whomever, and we can share it with the participants. But if I could just take a second to share a couple of things here, I will.
If you can I can put it on the portal. That's the conference portal. So we put 15 steps together that we think can be helpful for a community to begin doing work. And some of them are hard, some of them not so hard. Some of them are going to require partnerships. I think that's where the university could come into play to help with collecting some of this information. But really, it's about formulating a team. It's about figuring out the resources in your community. It's about figuring out who has service and who doesn't have service. Do you have schools and libraries or public safety facilities or businesses that don't have service? And then try to map those out so that you have a map showing where the served, unserved is. And then really, you look at some of the other steps is figuring out what your community's rank is from a connectivity standpoint. And then what challenges do you have in the community? Is it a terrain issue? Is it low population? Be able to figure out what your challenges are so that you know how to overcome those challenges. List opportunities for locality. When we were in Grayson County, Virginia, we had lots of at-home businesses came to us and talked about how they were having to get a satellite service, and their local connector who was providing them service who had caps on how much they could upload or download,
and they were having to get 2 different services to be able to not pay so much money in overages to be able to do business from home. So if you can have those stories, those individual stories. We had a story of an engineer who worked from home and he didn't have enough service to be able to upload maps or any data. He was having to go to a hotel parking lot to be able to do that, or somewhere like that. So capture those individual stories that you can tell, because those are real and those show the need. Know your demographic information, and then report on financial grant opportunities in the area. Know what those are. Know who to partner with, whether it's your planning council or whomever. And then I'll just quickly hit these. Surveys are key. Have a plan, whether it's working with a consultant, the university, or just your government. Develop a plan for what your priorities are for broadband and what you can do, and know where you need to go. And then identify who all the providers are in your area. Know who they are. Have a conversation with them. What are their plans? Are they going to build in your territory? Why aren't they building? What are their hurdles to providing service in your community? List prior, existing, or potential future broadband projects. Do you know what's going on around you? So you might be able to tap into some of those. And then collect feedback, and that goes back to those individual stories. Have a communication network where customers or people in your community can send you information about challenges they're having. I can tell you a number of stories we've heard in this process about people trying to work from home and can't, and they have the ability to make money from home. And then I'll just mention one last thing, and that is just an idea that I'm from Kentucky originally, and there was a program there called Kentucky Teleworks. And basically the workforce organization in Kentucky organized a place to house all of the opportunities in teleworking. And then they would help employ people who could work from home or in central places where you could go and work from a telework facility if you don't have broadband service at home. And they've employed now, I think, somewhere around 4,000 or 5,000 jobs since that effort started. So there's lots of things you could work and organize on. These 15 steps, I think, will be real helpful because it gets you an understanding of how big your challenge is and who your partners can be to help you solve those challenges. Yeah. Sorry for the long answer.
Sorry, Brad. Thank you. It's great information.
That's great.
Sarah, how are we doing on time?
We're doing great. I don't know if anybody wants to do, we would shift to closing remarks. I don't have any questions at the moment.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, then why don't we wrap it up with some closing remarks. I think, Brad, I think you've probably done your fair share there. How about we do one from Kris and then Natalie and Rob?
Hey, Charlie, I'd just like to wrap up. We're focused on customer service at USDA Rural Development, but I also take it as a personal challenge to help small communities around the state. And if I can ever be of help or assistance in providing an introduction or being able to pull a group of people together to help provide a big solution, focusing on the focus of this conference, I would just ask folks to either reach out through USDA or on social media personally, and we'll do anything I can to help someone pull their project together and make West Virginia a better place for our younger generation to come back and work, live, and raise a family.
Thanks, Kris. I appreciate that. And I'd like to tell you how much I really appreciate the hard work that you've done for us here these last few years.
Thanks, Charlie.
Really, really do appreciate it. Natalie?
Yeah, please do. I just put my contact information in the chat. Please reach out anytime, call, text, email, whatever's easiest for you. There isn't one size fits all on this. And I think the closest we've got is a really strong process, like what Brad has laid out. So if we can help you in figuring out where to start, please reach out. Can be a guide alongside you and in going through all of those different steps. So reach out no matter where you are, whether it's just an idea or you don't know where to start. We're happy to be your first call and get you connected to other folks working on this, whether in your area or across the state. So thanks so much. Excited to be able to work with y'all.
Thanks, Natalie. It's always a pleasure to work with you. Rob, any final thoughts?
Just appreciate being on the panel today. It was a good conversation. I think it was very valuable information that was put out there. Good discussion. Again, the Broadband Enhancement Council website is a good source for resources as well. You know, I'd recommend, Natalie, your group and what you're working on, you know, get listed on there with your contact information. And anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to Charlie Dennie, our new state director. and definitely Kelly Workman's still in that office, and she's still accessible and can help you in any way possible, any information you need.
Thanks, folks. I think it's been a good panel today. It was great to see all of you. I hope we've answered some questions and helped some folks out today.